What would you do if you saw a little girl on the sidewalk, no older than 6, standing alone, silent, holding out a bundle of handmade matchsticks to strangers who wouldn't even look at her? Think about it for a second. And while you do, tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from right now? We'd love to know. Now, back to the story. She didn't beg. She didn't chase anyone down. She just stood there, still and patient, as people rushed past her like she didn't exist. Her shoes were worn thin, her coat barely clinging to her shoulders, but there was something calm in her eyes. Like she was used to being overlooked. Every match she sold meant something, maybe a slice of bread, maybe enough for her and her mother to eat that night. But then, something changed. From a battered cardboard box nearby, a kitten stirred, tiny, frail, and trembling. The girl turned, knelt down, and looked at it. She had only 3 matches left. Just 3. And instead of saving them, she struck one. Cupping the flame in her hands, she leaned down and held it close to the kitten, trying to warm the fragile creature with the little she had. Not for money. Not for attention. Just because it was the right thing to do. And across the street, a sleek black car slowed to a stop. Behind the tinted windows, a man watched, wealthy, powerful, unreadable. But in that moment, something in him stirred. He didn't see a poor child. He saw strength. Kindness. A spark in a world that had long gone cold. She had nothing. And still gave everything. A tiny hand. Holding a giant heart. They didn't live in a house. Not even a shelter. Their home was a quiet corner behind a row of shops. Just out of sight, but close enough to hear life moving on without them. At night, they laid down on flattened cardboard. Under the weak glow of a flickering street lamp. One thin blanket. 2 bodies, huddled close. The little girl always curled up beside her mother. As if her small frame could protect the woman who had given her everything. And every morning, before the sun had fully risen, they were already awake. The mother, pale and tired, would sit up slowly, stifling a cough. She'd tried to ignore for months. And the girl? She would smile first. Always. A crooked, sleepy grin as she whispered, "Mama. It's a new day." That was her gift. Even with nothing, she made it feel like something. They spent their mornings gathering scrap wood. Carefully cutting it down into matchsticks with a small pocket knife. Wrapping them in paper she salvaged from old flyers and thrown out notebooks. Each one was crafted with care, like it mattered. Because to them, it did. Sometimes they sold them near bus stops. Other times, outside office buildings, where people in suits rushed past. Never slowing down. On good days, they earned enough for bread and maybe a warm drink. On bad days, they just shared silence. But no matter what, the mother never let her daughter go hungry. Even when she hadn't eaten. Even when her own stomach ached. She always made sure her child was fed first. She was a mother who had lost everything, except her purpose. And that, she held on to like gold. There were moments, when the world was still, and the traffic noise faded into the background, that the little girl would lean her head against her mother's shoulder and whisper, "Someday we'll have a house. With a real door. And beds that don't fold up." The mother would nod. Her eyes would glisten, but she wouldn't let the tears fall. Not in front of her daughter. Never in front of her daughter. She had learned to carry pain with grace. To make strength look quiet. To smile through exhaustion. Because even if the streets had become their home, she refused to let them become her daughter's future. And somehow, through all of it, the girl kept believing that something better was coming. That maybe, just maybe, they were one small miracle away from everything changing. The car was parked just across the street. Sleek. Silent. Black. A luxury model that barely made a sound, even when its engine ran. Inside, the leather was spotless. The windows, tinted deep. It was the kind of car most people didn't even glance at, because they assumed it belonged to someone untouchable. And in the back seat, behind the glass, sat a man who could have been anywhere else in the world. He wasn't supposed to be here. This wasn't his usual route. But something had pulled him this way today. A meeting had run early. His driver had taken a different turn. Fate? Coincidence? Call it what you want. But the moment he saw the little girl lighting that match for the kitten, he didn't look away. He didn't know her. Didn't know her story. But in the stillness of that moment, something ancient stirred in his chest, something he thought he'd buried a long time ago. He watched her crouch over the animal, her hands shielding the flame. And for a moment, he forgot the world outside his car even existed. This man, this billionaire, had everything. Private jets, a mansion overlooking the bay, a staff that answered to every command. But somehow, with all of it, he felt hollow. Money had bought him space. Power had bought him silence. But neither had ever brought him peace. Because long before the title, before the tailored suits and gold watches, before he built the company that made him a household name, he had been a child too. Not on the streets, no. But forgotten, just the same. Raised in a group home where birthdays were shared, and bedtime stories were rare. He remembered what it was like to be unseen, to wait for someone who never came back, to wish for warmth, not just in the room, but in someone's eyes. He hadn't thought about that part of his life in years. He had learned to hide it, to armor up, to work harder than everyone else, until no one could touch him again. But this little girl, this quiet, selfless child with matchsticks in her hands, she cracked something open. Not with words, not with tears, just with kindness. She had nothing, and yet she gave everything to something smaller than her. That's what stayed with him. That's what made him pause. He didn't even realize his driver had spoken until the third time. "Sir, should I keep going?" He looked away from the window slowly. "No," he said quietly, "not yet." His driver glanced back, surprised. The man never changed his schedule, never lingered. But today, he did. Because for the first time in a long time, he saw something money couldn't buy. A flicker of goodness. A quiet act of love. And something deep inside him whispered, "Don't just drive away this time." The next morning started like every other. Cold concrete. Aching joints. The mother stretched slowly, stifling another cough as her daughter brushed a few crumbs from the blanket they slept on. No words of complaint. Just tired eyes. And routine. They packed their things into a single cloth bag. The same matches from the night before, still unsold, were tied together carefully by the girl, her small fingers folding the paper just right. Another day. Another chance. Maybe someone would stop this time. But before they could move, the girl spotted something on the ground nearby. Not trash. Not paper. An envelope. Sealed. Clean. And resting just a few inches from where they'd slept. She picked it up slowly. Looked around. There was no one. The mother took it gently from her hands, examining the front. No name. No note. Just a hotel logo and a room key card tucked neatly inside. She hesitated. Her instinct told her not to trust it. Nothing came without a cost, especially not in their world. But the girl. She held the envelope to her chest and smiled. Like maybe this was the miracle she'd been waiting for. The mother looked at her daughter. And then back at the card. Later that afternoon, they stood outside the hotel. It was tall, polished, quiet, the kind of place they had only seen from far away. The mother hesitated at the entrance. But the girl reached up, took her hand, and whispered, "Just for one night, Mama. Please." Inside, the staff said nothing. Maybe someone had called ahead. Maybe money had silenced the questions. But when they reached the room, something inside them broke. A real bed. Clean sheets. A private bathroom. Warm water. A door that locked. The mother sat on the edge of the bed without speaking. Then she lowered her face into her hands and began to cry. Not because she was sad. But because, for the first time in years, she wasn't afraid. The girl ran her fingers across the pillows, her eyes wide with wonder. She didn't ask who sent the envelope. She didn't care. All she knew was that tonight, they were safe. Just one night. But to them, it felt like the whole world had shifted. The next morning, the hotel lobby was quiet. Soft light poured in through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across marble floors. The little girl stirred her cocoa with both hands, humming softly as she sat at a corner table. Her mother watched her with gentle eyes, still unsure if any of this was real. And then, He walked in. The man from the car. Not in a suit this time. Just a simple button-down shirt and dark jeans, still polished, still composed, but softer somehow. He nodded at the mother. She stood quickly, unsure of what to say. But he raised a hand. "No pressure," he said quietly. "I just wanted to check in." His voice was calm, unthreatening. The girl smiled at him, the same crooked smile she gave her mother every morning. He smiled back. And for the first time, it didn't feel forced. They sat across from each other at a small table, the girl bouncing her feet under the chair. She didn't speak much. Just listened, wide-eyed, as the grown-ups began to talk. At first, the conversation was stiff. She didn't trust easily, life had taught her that. She wanted to know who he was, why he had helped, what he wanted. He didn't give her a sales pitch. He didn't try to play savior. He just listened. And when he finally did speak, it wasn't about his business, or his money, or some perfect solution to their problems. It was about childhood. "I grew up in a group home," he said, eyes drifting toward the window. "No family. No visitors. Just me, a bunk bed, and a file with my name on it." The mother said nothing at first. But her eyes softened. Just a little. "I was 6 when I realized no one was coming for me," he continued. "So I stopped hoping. Started surviving instead." He didn't cry. But his voice cracked, just slightly, like a man who had learned to control his pain, and was only now learning how to share it. The mother finally spoke. "I wasn't in a group home," she said, quietly. "But it still felt like I was raising myself." She paused, then added, "And now, I'm raising her." Their eyes met, two people who had learned how to build walls. Now sitting on opposite sides of a table, quietly lowering their guard. He looked at the little girl, who was now blowing bubbles into her cocoa. "She's got something rare," he said. "That match. The way she lit it for that kitten." "I know," the mother whispered. "She gives even when she has nothing." There was a long silence. Not awkward. Not empty. Just full. Full of understanding. Full of pain that didn't need to be explained. Before he left, he placed something on the table. Not money. Just a simple notebook. Its cover read, "For dreams that deserve to be written down." "She told me she wanted a house," he said. "Maybe she can draw it. Maybe you can write about it." And then he stood. He didn't ask for anything in return. He just nodded once more, and walked away. But something had shifted. A conversation over coffee, between two people who had no reason to trust anyone, had opened a door neither of them knew they still had. The next time they met, it wasn't planned. He had returned to the hotel lobby with an envelope in hand. Not mysterious this time, not anonymous. This time, it had his name on it. Inside was a check. More zeros than she had ever seen in one place. Enough to change their lives overnight. He slid it gently across the table, no fanfare. Just calm eyes, and a quiet offer. But she didn't even look at it. Her hand stayed in her lap. Her voice was steady. "I can't take that." He blinked, surprised. "Why not?" She looked him straight in the eye. "Because I don't want to owe anyone anything," she said. "I've spent too many nights being looked down on. I've been offered food with strings attached. Shelter with conditions." Her voice cracked, just slightly. "I'm tired of feeling like I'm someone's project." He leaned back in his chair, the check still sitting between them like a line neither of them could cross. "I'm not trying to fix you," he said quietly. "I just want to help." "I know," she replied. "And I'm grateful." Then she reached forward and slid the envelope back toward him. "But if you really want to help," she continued, "ask me what I can accept. What I need. Not what you think will make things better." He looked at her for a long moment. There was no anger in her voice. No resentment. Just strength. Boundaries. Dignity. And something about that moved him more than gratitude ever could. Because for the first time, he understood. Money could buy a room, a car, a company. But it couldn't buy trust. It couldn't buy the right to walk into someone's story and rewrite it just because you could afford to. She didn't want a rescuer. She didn't want a savior. She wanted to be seen as an equal. Someone who could still stand on her own feet, even if life had knocked her down more times than she could count. And he respected that. He folded the envelope slowly and tucked it back into his coat. No frustration. No ego. Just a man who was starting to learn that the most valuable things in life can't be bought. They have to be earned. Later that week, he found them sitting under a tree near the edge of the park. The mother was reading from a second-hand novel she'd borrowed from the hotel's front desk. The little girl, meanwhile, was sprawled on her stomach in the grass, her shoes kicked off, her fingers stained with ink. She had the notebook he'd given her. The one with the words on the front, for dreams that deserve to be written down. She was filling every page. Not with sentences, but with pictures. Colorful, wobbly drawings. A house. A garden. 3 stick figures holding hands. One tall. One medium. One small. She looked up and saw him. Waved like she'd known him forever. Then held up the page like it was a masterpiece. "This is our house," she said proudly. "When we get one, we're gonna plant sunflowers in the yard." He knelt down beside her. "Can I see?" he asked. She handed him the notebook without hesitation. There was no shame. No fear. Just belief. Simple, honest belief that the future could still be beautiful. He turned the page slowly. A drawing of a bed. A kitchen with food. A dog they didn't have yet, but she had already named him Lucky. He didn't speak. Couldn't. Because as he looked through those messy, hopeful sketches, something tightened in his chest. Not guilt. Not pity. Something gentler. Something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Longing. Not for what he had, but for what they had. Love. Closeness. The kind of dream that isn't bought or built, but grown together. The mother joined them, crouching beside her daughter. She smiled, brushing hair from the little girl's forehead. "She draws it almost every day," she said softly. "Says it helps her believe it's real." He nodded, still staring at the page. And then he carefully tore out the drawing, folded it, and slipped it into his coat pocket. "I'll keep this safe," he whispered. The girl just grinned. "Okay. But don't lose it." He smiled too. Not a chance. In that moment, he realized he didn't just want to help them find a home. He wanted to be part of the picture. In the days that followed, he didn't show up with checks. He showed up with groceries, sketch pads, a worn-out copy of The Little Prince, and 2 umbrellas, because she always forgot one. He stopped calling it help. And she stopped pretending she didn't need it. It wasn't charity anymore. It was care. One night, they all sat on the rooftop terrace of the hotel. The city glowed below them like a galaxy turned upside down. The little girl was curled up in a blanket, fast asleep on a lounge chair, a crayon still tucked between her fingers. The billionaire and the mother sat a few feet apart, wrapped in their own silence. He broke it first. "You know," he said, "I used to think saving someone meant swooping in, solving everything, making it all disappear." She didn't say anything, just waited. He exhaled slowly. "But you don't need rescuing." She turned to him, finally. "No," she said. "But I don't mind company while I climb." That made him smile. The real kind. The kind that softens the lines on your face and lives in your eyes. She looked out over the city again. "I've carried everything on my back for years," she said. "Every decision. Every meal. Every night wondering if we'd be safe." A pause. "But lately, it doesn't feel as heavy." He looked at her, not with pity, but with quiet admiration. "You make it look effortless," he said. She scoffed softly. "It's not." "I know," he replied. "That's why it's beautiful." Another silence. But this time, it was warm. Comfortable. Not everything had been said. But everything that needed to be felt had been shared. It was no longer about saving them. It was about staying. About showing up, again and again. Not to change their story, but to belong to it. And somehow, that meant more. Because sometimes, The real rescue isn't being pulled from the fire. It's finally having someone willing to stand there with you and build a life on the ashes. It wasn't a mansion. It wasn't even in the city. But when she stepped inside the little cottage on the edge of town, hand in hand with her daughter, her breath caught in her throat. It was perfect. The curtains were yellow, the kind that let in morning sun. The floor creaked a little, but the smell of wood and warmth made it feel alive. There was a garden out back, wild and overgrown, but full of promise. And in the corner of the yard, a tiny patch of dirt where someone had already planted sunflowers. She turned to him, tears brimming. "You remembered?" He nodded, his voice gentle. "She drew it. I just followed the blueprint." The little girl ran room to room, laughter echoing off the walls. She flung herself onto a mattress that hadn't even been unwrapped yet and yelled, "This one's mine." There was no grand reveal. No camera crews. No keys in a velvet box. Just a man, a woman, and a child, standing in a space built with patience, trust, and kindness. He hadn't bought them a life. He'd simply made space for them to grow one. They painted walls together, hung mismatched frames, burned a few dinners, got a dog, not a puppy, but a rescue. His name, of course, was Lucky. They filled the house slowly. Not with things, but with laughter. With quiet mornings. With silly traditions and hand-me-down furniture and fridge magnets from places they hadn't even been to yet. And somewhere along the way, what started as survival turned into living. What started as protection turned into partnership. What started as a stranger's kindness became love. Not the fairy tale kind with glass slippers or magic spells, but the real kind. The everyday kind. The kind you build one moment at a time. And when people asked the little girl what she wanted to be when she grew up, she didn't say rich. She said, "I wanted to make people feel safe, like home. And in a world that had once been so cold." Her answer felt like sunlight. Years ago, a little girl stood on a street corner, selling matches that no one wanted. People rushed past her, busy, distracted, numb, never stopping long enough to see her. To really see her. She wasn't begging. She was offering warmth. And somehow, no one noticed. But now, she doesn't sell matches anymore. She lives among them. In a home where the kitchen glows at 6 a.m., where fairy lights wrap around stair railings, and where birthday candles flicker for more than just wishes, but for proof that another year was lived in safety and love. The girl who once lit matches to keep her fingers warm now draws sunshine with crayons. She writes stories in notebooks. She's learning to ride a bike. She laughs with her whole chest. And the man who once drove past pain with tinted windows now walks through front doors without knocking. He cooks breakfast. He carries groceries. And every now and then, he simply sits, just to listen to the quiet hum of peace. The mother, once weary and guarded, smiles without apology now. Her eyes don't scan for exits. Her hands don't flinch when touched. She wears joy like a second skin. Because the life they built wasn't given. It was earned. Brick by brick. Meal by meal. Word by word. Not with grand gestures, but with ordinary kindness repeated over and over again. And here's the truth no one talks about. Sometimes, the greatest wealth is knowing someone saw your emptiness and didn't try to fill it all at once. They just stayed. Lit one small light at a time. Until you could finally see yourself again. Until you became the flame. So when people ask what changed the billionaire's heart, what made him stop, slow down, and step in? It wasn't pity. It wasn't guilt. It was a child. With ink-stained fingers and big, bright eyes, offering him a drawing of the house. And for the first time in years, he believed in one too. Because in the end, it's not about how much you have. It's what you're willing to share. Even if it's just a spark. Even if it's just a match. And in the end, sometimes the smallest lights lead us home. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to Heartfelt Tales TV for more stories that touch the soul.